Hi, thanks for coming to my channel. If you like what you see, if you like my content, please do subscribe. Feel free to share these videos and leave comments. So I've just watched the episode Terry Newless of The Crown, the Netflix series The Crown. I really can't praise that series highly enough. It's the best historic period drama I've ever seen. Um, I enjoyed Downton Abbey, but The Crown really is superb. I can't praise it highly enough. I might even make a video specifically about it. And actually, it's my introduction to Netflix because I'd previously been critical of Netflix, or maybe not critical, but wary of it being a rival to cinema. But my sister-in-law got me onto it via her account, and I've been hooked on this series. It really is superb. My parents like it as well, particularly my mother, who's more of a royalist than my father. But this episode it documents Charles and Diana's visit to Australia and New Zealand in 1983. It's not the first episode of Charles and Diana. That first episode, um, I think it's under the title Gold Stick, which is when Charles first meets her. The music that's used is beautiful. Um, I should probably say I will be making likely specific videos about the crown and about Diana, Princess of Wales, later on. The reason I say a specific video on Diana is what I want to cover here is more Charles and Diana. Now, I know I've done this before, but I've more thoughts at the moment, and there's a few other things I want to add, or maybe I'll even use this video instead of the previous one. Um, but I will be making another video on Diana because in I believe it's July will be what would have been her 60th birthday. So it would be a good time to do a retrospective. Um, what an incredible woman! What an incredible woman! Very few people in modern British history that have had that sort of impact. Um, but actually today it's a sovereign that we should be thinking about because it's her 95th birthday. Queen Elizabeth II is the world's longest serving monarch, living monarch that is. Um, she's the world's longest serving and oldest head of state. Um, King Bhumibol of Thailand reigned for slightly longer. I think it was 71 or 72 years. But with her health being pretty robust, I could see her being on the throne for quite a while. But like I said in my videos about Prince Philip, the last few days must have been tough for her. She's a very stoic woman, but and it's part of her generation not really openly showing emotion, but it must have been tough. I mean, Queen Victoria was known as the Widow of Windsor because she loved Albert so dearly. And of course, Elizabeth and Philip were extremely close, well known. So to be alone in that sense, 73 years, it must have an impact. But I say in that sense, apparently the royal women have been really um, helping the Queen out. The Duchess of Cambridge, the Countess of Wessex, and others have been really coming to her side during this time. And now Charles, of course, is really the patriarch of the family. So his assessment, his um, life, his role, because when we talk about members of the royal family, it's really their whole life we assess. Um, so anyway, to get back to this episode, firstly, I want to say that I think that the acting of Emma Corrin and Josh O'Connor is superb. Some of the best I've ever seen. Um, just the mannerisms, you can tell they've really, really studied the subjects without just imitating them. I think they're superb. But basically, this episode looks at a time when the royal couple were making this visit to Australia and New Zealand, at a time when Republican sentiments were quite high in Australia. It features late Prime Minister Bob Hawke, who was a bit of a Republican, and he made quite a sharp speech actually. The thing about The Crown is they really do the research, and of course it's not a documentary. Of course there'll be some artistic license, but what I find remarkable is, you see these things in each episode and you think, nah, that can't have happened. That must be an exaggeration. You Google it, you look it up, you find archival footage, and it's pretty close to the mark. So that's something that's quite remarkable about the series, and I think one reason it's been so successful is it's pretty authentic. Now, apparently Charles and Camilla are very worried about their portrayal, or have been, or at least Charles has been. Apparently Camilla takes a different view. She's the Countess of Cornwall is, excuse me, the Duchess of Cornwall. Um, she is less phased than Charles is, which is interesting. Um, but it basically shows that during this royal tour, it was quite rocky because it initially started off where they were having a rocky situation. Then they came to kind of this truce, and there's quite a tender moment between them, and then it all goes back down again because Charles actually started getting envious of the publicity and the attention that Diana was getting, when really she was the supporting role. It was meant to be kind of the showcase for him as heir to the throne, where she would have been the consort. Now, in any situation, that is going to be difficult, and certainly by no means the only example. Probably President Peron in Argentina sometimes felt outshone by Evita, and I'm sure there's other examples. Um, there's a few bits in this episode that I personally felt a bit sorry for Charles, in the sense that if the crowds were, that openly cruel, like, where's your wife? That's the only reason we came, and openly cheering Diana and even booing him. For example, there's a scene where it shows him falling off his horse in a polo match, and they actually laugh. I don't know how much of that is true, but there is artistic license. There's a scene, for example, where in the episode, Charles cracks a joke. By the way, this is all disclaimers if you haven't seen it, but Charles cracks a joke and the audience kind of groans. Now, if you look at the real thing, actually, they laugh with him. What he says is, I'm always told how lucky I am to be married to this lady. And then Diana pulls her face, and he sort of says, that's the thing about ladies, you never know what they're saying behind your back. Now, in reality, they were both laughing, and it was quite a light-hearted moment in the episode. It kind of reiterates how Charles was feeling a bit jealous and a bit petty. But the feeling I'm left at the end of the episode is a mixture of Charles is being a bit petty, being jealous of his wife, and you'd feel very sorry for Diana. But at the same time, you feel a little bit sorry for Charles as well, because it can't have been easy to have, people openly favoring your wife in that way. I think the mistake that Charles made was taking out on her. It wasn't her fault. Um, and the impression you get in this, and I think there is some truth in it, based on accounts from numerous sources, is that the royal family were not very helpful to this young woman. Of course, this is almost 40 years ago now. I think things have greatly improved since then. Um, but, I do think that there was a coldness and a stiffness. And I think that's something that well, it has changed to a large extent, but I think some of it is still there. That's why, although I don't entirely trust Meghan Markle, I don't absolutely dismiss everything she says. Um, I don't think she's Diana Mark II. Let me just be clear about that. I really don't think she is, and I think there is differences between them. But with the whole Diana Charles thing, it's a very strange phenomenon in some ways. It's a very tragic phenomenon, and I do think it's profoundly sad that it didn't work out. I've got a mug from the royal wedding of that time. His Royal Highness Prince Charles, Lady Diana Spencer. It's so sad that it didn't work out, and I've long felt that. Had she not died young in tragic circumstances, maybe the public perception would be a little bit more balanced. When people die young in those sort of circumstances, they're automatically martyrized. And I'm not saying that her reputation isn't deserved. I think very highly of Diana, and I'll be probably talking more about that when I make a video about her. But I also think it's unfortunate that Charles is. There is a certain segment of people, really hardcore Diana fans who really do vilify Charles and Camilla, and they come out with spiteful comments like it's a pity. I saw one when I was reading comments on some of the archives. He had a swan and instead he married a horse. Now, like I said in the last video, if your whole point of attack is on the Duchess of Cornwall's looks, that's just that's just bloody shallow. It's whatever way you look at it, fine to dislike her as a person or personality or whatever, but to attack her on her appearance is absurd. And personally, I think she's just an average looking older woman. I don't think she's that bad looking. She's not Diana, obviously, but she's not. She's just a normal looking older woman. I don't think that the spite that she gets is deserved. Um, was Charles a good husband? No, he wasn't. He could have been a lot more supportive. He was a lot older. He was part of the system. He should have been a lot more supportive. By the same token, though, who are we to judge what goes on in a marriage, right? How can we, as the public, as viewers of a popular dramatization, how can we really judge this man and his current wife to the extent that we think we know the whole, absolutely every detail of what went on? Clearly, it was a strained marriage, and I think that it wasn't helped by Charles not being as supportive as he probably should have been. Um, but dare I say it, there might have been times Diana wasn't entirely helpful either. Yes, she was very young, and that always has to be factored in. But she did get older, and she perhaps could be difficult at times. I'm only saying that in the nature of fairness. Um, but it does frustrate me when people take such a black and white view of this because I think they're honoring Diana by doing that. Actually, if you think about what William and Harry has said, they've been very clear that Charles is very much the father, or at least William has. Obviously, there's been strange recently, but he might have been not a great husband, but it's very clear that he is a good father. At least, certainly from William's perspective, or at least, uh, I've never seen Charles as being a cold father or something like that. And let's not forget, during Harry and Meghan's wedding, it was Charles who walked the bride down the aisle. Um, there's a lot of videos online that show another side to Charles, which is very different from the stereotype of kind of a stiff, blue blood, snobby royal, which he is too often unfairly portrayed as. My gut feeling is Charles is fundamentally a decent man. Dare I say it, I quite like him. Um, and I think he'll be a good king. He won't be king for very long because obviously he will be in his 70s, well in his 70s when he becomes king. But I do think the ghost of Diana is forever going to be a shadow over Charles and Camilla, and that's a little bit unfortunate. I do wonder, had history been different, had Charles married Camilla in the beginning, would be no Princess Diana. We'd never have heard about her. She would just be a young noblewoman, and she might have become sort of a courtier or something. She might have maybe had some social connection to the monarchy, but she certainly wouldn't have become the most famous woman in the world. Um, but here's the problem: people blame Charles for that, but actually, Charles was sort of trapped as well because it was the system that didn't allow Charles to marry Camilla. I mean, I asked the same question. I said, why didn't he just marry her in the beginning? Well, Camilla had been divorced, so at that time, the royal family was still quite stuffy about those sort of things. It was behind the times, and you know, the heir to the throne couldn't marry a divorced woman. I guess because they had bad memories of the whole Wallet Simpson thing and the abdication crisis. But that was also the Church of England, because of course the monarch is the governor of the Church of England, and the church had very strong views on that. So maybe what we're left with is that both the monarchy and the church need to modernize their views to the modern world, i.e., that sometimes marriages just don't work out and people aren't compatible. And when people are so unhappy and so miserable that it's just in the way that in the situation that Charles and Diana were in, then um, maybe there should be more tolerance for divorcees. Um, and I think that's sad because it meant that you had this young woman who was totally unprepared. She was thrown in the deep end. She wasn't getting support. I'm talking about Diana, of course. But, people forget that Charles was unhappy as well. I'm sure there was times he was lonely and felt probably not as lonely as Diana because he was much more part of the system and he had Camilla. But you know, to suggest that it's all black and white and to sort of ignore the fact that Charles was also in a strained marriage, I think is unfair. But my overall feeling is that the whole Diana story is deeply compelling, but also deeply tragic. She deserved a lot better. Um, and it's just such a sad thing that it didn't work out good in the end. Um, because I think for what it's worth, there probably were times that they did have real affection for each other and even maybe love. I mean, that infamous statement that Charles made, whatever love means, it's possible to read too much into that. It might just have been a bit of a flippant statement as opposed to saying he didn't love her. I I'm tempted to play the devil's advocate and say he really wanted to. But love is a complex thing, and this idea that because Diana was beautiful and Camilla wasn't, um, then Charles is an idiot. Well, who's to say that? Surely it's a testament that he wasn't going on looks. Surely give him some credit for that. But I'm not saying this stuff to sort of defend Charles. I do think he should have been a lot more supportive, and that's inexcusable the way he really didn't. This young woman was thrown into the deep end, and you do end up feeling profoundly sympathetic to Diana for that reason. But that just makes her story all the more tragic and her as a figure all the more compelling. Although recently I read that the whole shy die thing was actually not accurate because the whole thing about tipping her head down and so on was because she was quite tall and she was aware of that. I don't know. Um, but I must admit that the Crown's made me more royalist of late. I'm not a sycophantic royalist. I would never sort of say, oh, they cannot be criticised, or I would never worship any member of the royal family, including the Queen. But I think the Crown has definitely humanised this family a lot more. Um, and I just think that they are such deeply entrenched part of our culture, and it's something that Republicans can't deny. The royal family, particularly the Windsors, I mean, royalty in this country goes back over a millennium, but Windsors in particular are such a deep part of our culture. I mean, no one automatically thinks of Spain and thinks of the royal family, or Japan thinks of the royal family, or Belgium. There is something about the United Kingdom's monarchy and the Windsor dynasty that is so deeply entrenched in our culture. No getting away from that. Anyway, I just think it's unfortunate that there is a contingent of people who are so vitriolic about Charles and Camilla, and it's really unfortunate. I can understand the criticism, but I don't think it justifies outright vilification. They weren't there. They don't know all the ins and outs. Um, Why can't Charles have been not a wonderful husband but still be a very good father? People are complex, and to me, the fact that he did have feelings just makes him more human. Um, it's often said the fairy tale romance wasn't a fairy tale. Well, in that sense, it just shows that actually it humanizes both Charles and Diana a lot more. The fact that it was strained, and that's tragic. Um, but I think there's things that maybe could have avoided that if Charles had perhaps been more supportive, if Camilla hadn't been a factor, if Charles had been a bit. Who knows? I'm not even going to double guess what his feelings were. I don't know. Um, but I do think, Diana was very young, and I think she should have been supported a lot more, especially with the mental health problems and bulimia problems that she was having. I mean, it's impossible not to feel desperately sorry for her. She was in the deep end. She must have been desperately alone. Um, and that's tragic. And here's the thing, I was looking at newspapers of her death recently, and I think it was the Daily Mail said that if if people are going to forgive Charles, it should be on this day, because you could see at her funeral he was clearly devastated. This idea that he had no feelings for Diana, I think he did. Maybe not as much as Camilla, but it's very clear in 1997 Charles was shattered by what happened to her. And actually, it was Charles that pushed for a state funeral. Um, so this idea that he didn't care at all, I think is nonsense. Anyway, I'll round that up, but I just think that the Charles Diana saga, there are aspects to it that people overlook, and for example, the fact that Charles is also trapped in the marriage. I mean, Charles couldn't just have got a divorce back then. Probably he should have tried a lot harder in the sense of moving away from Camilla, and Camilla should have seen it as well. So by no means am I saying that they don't deserve criticism, but attacking her for, you know, on looks, like contrasting Camilla and Diana on looks, strikes me as incredibly shallow. Behavior, yeah, I think that could be judged. Diana, of course, also had affairs, but to be fair to her, maybe that came because she felt no way out. She needed love and support. But they did both have affairs. So in that sense, Diana wasn't totally innocent, you know, and that's not a criticism necessarily. It's just humanizing her. In fact, her brother very rightly said she doesn't need to be eulogized. She doesn't need to be the term he used. She doesn't need to be marbleized or lionized, because her very human frailties made her more compelling. I mean, she was an absolutely remarkable woman, and he will be our future king. So I think it's going to have interest forever, and the crown's just reignited all of this. Anyway, today I'm thinking of the Queen because it's her birthday, and she's a widow after 73 years. Let me know your thoughts. Thanks for watching.